Good afternoon. My name is Emilio Ramirez. I am Director of Housing for the City of Oxnard, and I thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss potential changes and amendments to the inclusionary housing ordinance here within the City of Oxnard. I apologize that we are going to have to repeat this PowerPoint live so that we can solicit an interactive workshop and advice and feedback relative to the fairly lengthy questions that we have. By way of a quick overview of an agenda, um, basically we're going to provide some introduction to the team, um, offer an introductory to the existing inclusionary housing ordinance and the purpose behind it, the in lieu fees that are part of the inclusionary housing ordinance. I'll explain that a little bit later. And then ask for feedback regarding potential changes to that local inclusionary housing ordinance. Discuss your feedback of those various potential changes or things maybe that we missed. So first, what would be the purpose of an inclusionary housing ordinance? So an inclusionary housing requirement is that private developers reserve a percentage of the housing units for a low or very low income or moderate income population as part of their otherwise market rate developments. So when they build something, they have to set aside a certain percentage that would be affordable. One of the city's housing element program addresses affordable housing needs and its equitable development. So this inclusionary housing ordinance is part of the compliance of the housing element. The integration of affordable units within market rate developments allows us to kind of spread out and not concentrate any singular aspect. Currently, the city of Oxford does have an inclusionary housing ordinance. It was established in 1999. It requires that all new residential developments that have more than 10 units within that new development, that it set aside 10% of those new units to be made affordable to lower income households. Where if it's a rental project, then half of those units, half of the 10%, would be for very low income affordability and half for the low income affordability. It would have a restriction of 20 years. Um, but if it is for a for sale project, then it's 10%. And in that case, it would have a resale restriction for sale units. So the inclusionary housing ordinance does allow for a developer to essentially buy out of the obligation to produce the units. And that opportunity to buy out is the in lieu fee. That in lieu fee was adopted and updated in May 2020 via council resolution. And you can see the relative in lieu fees that are in existence as of July 1, 2021. For multifamily rental units at $22,000, multifamily for sale units at $27,000, and single family homes at $28,000. So we're asking for your advice, your feedback on things that could change within the inclusionary housing ordinance as we proceed. And these are just things that we have identified. Doesn't mean it's the complete global of things that could change, or maybe it's less than these. And so we're definitely asking for your feedback on these and others that you may think up and advise. The percentage of lower income units, that threshold that you described, whether it's consistent with state law. I'm going to tell you about that in a little bit. The approval of paying in lieu fees, the incentive or credits for affordable housing, the unit size requirement, the restriction of how we mandate the continued affordability for sale units. In this case, resale restrictions versus equity share. There might say level of inconsistency with state law. A new thing that we came up with called the commercial linkage fee. So first of all, the percentage of low-income units. As I mentioned, when you have a development that's more than 10 units, it requires that 10% of the for sale units, if it is a for sale development, be available to lower income houses. But if it's a for rent development, then it has to be split half between very low and half between lower income. So you can see what other jurisdictions do. So we're kind of at the lower end of what the other jurisdictions might offer. The threshold for requiring inclusionary units in Oxnard is 10 units. In other words, if you build 10 units or more, then you have to offer inclusionary units. If your development includes 9 units or less, then you do not have an inclusionary production obligation. So there lies a question: should we amend it? Should we make it be lower? Should we make it be higher? And would love your feedback. There is a variety of state laws that themselves impose production of affordable units on various conditions. One of those is the density bonus law. So the density bonus law allows a developer to have a waiver of some development standard, or including potentially building more units than what the local jurisdiction would allow. And if it does that, then it would then require that a percentage of those additional units be made to be affordable. And you can see on screen what they would require. They're different than the city. For example, the household income restrictions, we use 80%, they use 70%. It needs to be probably made a little bit more consistent so that we can apply them together. Right now, the inclusionary housing ordinance requires that if a developer chooses to pay the in lieu fee rather than build the units, then they have to go to council to get approval for those. So we're asking, should that remain, or should that be authorized at the staff level? So that's a question that we would like your feedback on. So there is, as I mentioned, that fairly standard 10% set aside, but if there was an opportunity for other valued affordability standards, should we offer incentives for that? For example, let's say that a person decided to offer permanent supportive housing units for a very, very extremely low income population, i.e. homeless, then would they get a credit as against the 10%? Let's say if it is PSH, then it's 9%. That's something that we would love your feedback on. There is a fairly odd requirement within the existing inclusionary housing ordinance, and it requires that for sale units have at least 3-bedroom units. So despite that the project may or may not be building the units, so should we make that a little bit more conducive to what is being built? In other words, if it's a 10-unit development of all 2-bedroom units, do we impose them to require to build 3-bedroom units when they don't? Or should we just have a set aside of that which is built? Resale restrictions versus the equity share. This is the primary difference between the state law and the local ordinance, where the local ordinance requires a resale restriction, which means that when a developer is building a for sale development, same tract of single family homes, let's say, then that home is, the price is set to be affordable. When the home buyer, the original home buyer, sells it, they have to sell it at a affordable price to the subsequent buyer. That's the current way that we do it for inclusionary ordinance. But the state, they do an equity share. So they essentially assist the first buyer. And then after that, the next buyer doesn't necessarily have to be low income, because what happens is that the local jurisdiction recaptures, is paid a portion of the equity that the house accumulates, and therefore we essentially flip that dollar amount so that we can produce additional affordable units. So your opinion on that? This is a new idea, and we mentioned it just because we want to be try to think of new things that we haven't thought of. So this is an example of something that could be new. Doesn't have to be this, and for that matter, seeking your advice on potential new ideas. Commercial linkage fee. So do we apply a fee to a development that is not housing? Use it for other things, unemployment purpose. So that's the end of the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.